All right, good morning. Feels like it's been a really long time, doesn't it? Like we started and then we just all disappeared for a week. And I had to remind myself this morning. I'm like, oh yeah, right. It felt like a long time ago. So it's nice to see you all. Did everyone have a nice long weekend? It could have been better for me, right? I'm a little sad because my guy lost on Monday night, but I don't want to talk about it too much, right? I mean, just a little bit. I was pretty unhappy all night. I was like, I have to watch it because what if it's his last game? But I wanted to turn it off because it was hard to watch. It was kind of mixed, but luckily, as a fantasy football fan, I have lots of favorite players. So now I just switch gears to Patrick Mahomes and hope for him. So we'll see. But anyway, could have been a better football weekend, but otherwise it was nice. And I'm down to 67 days for my cruise. Again, not that I'm counting, but my phone reminds me every day, which is kind of fun. So under 2 months or just over 2 months, 7 days away. Anyway, we'll get back to this, but important things, football and cruises. Those are the important things in life. But we left off here and we'll keep going with chapter 1. So last time we spent a lot of time talking about those 5 Ds of abnormality, right? That somebody, if they potentially have a mental illness, they are deviant, they have distress, dysfunction, danger, and duration, right? And so what we'll do today is we'll build on that, talking about how did we view abnormality in the past, and then kind of building up to today, some of the common professions that we have in this field today and so on. And I'll put out there right off the bat, our history of treatment is really, really bad, right? If you look at some of the things that we've done to try and treat or cure mental illness throughout history, just shameful, right? We have done all sorts of stuff from exorcisms and trephinations, which we'll talk about here on this first slide, to putting people in bizarre chairs where we spun them till they passed out. We used leeches, we used all sorts of different bizarre treatments. And the biggest reason is we just didn't really know how to help people, right? So as we look at some of these things in the past, know that we've come a long, long way from here, but it took us a bit to get there, right? So if we look at some of the earliest recorded stuff that we have, way back in time, we thought that any kind of abnormal behavior, so anything that we would probably call mental illness now, was the result of evil spirits or magical beings. So if somebody had mental illness, they were possessed, right, by some kind of evil spirit. And the only way then to make them better was to force or coax that demon out of their body. So in the past, some common methods that we would use to do this were trephinations and exorcisms. Both of them very dangerous. A lot of people died in these procedures. Trephination is what you see in that image of that skull over there. Notice how there are a couple of big holes out of it. We used to literally cut away circular sections of the skull. And the idea behind doing this was that it would make a space for the evil spirits to leave, right? That was literally the intent, that if we make a hole, the evil spirit will float its way out, right? And that person will get better. And so this was often done with a variety of different instruments. Sometimes it was done like almost like tapping. They would hold a thing up and they would tap around the skull to make small holes. Other times it was more almost like an early lobotomy. But the idea was to create a space for the spirits to leave. And again, a lot of people died during these procedures. Yeah. No. So the biggest thing that they did was sometimes they would use like camphor and things to knock people out, if you were lucky. And if you weren't so lucky, they would restrain you and tie you down. So yeah, really cruel, really awful. And again, a lot of people died. And what you would see is somebody who had a mental illness might be like agitated, talking a lot, like upset. They would perform this procedure and all of a sudden they're calm and quiet and docile. Now they're brain dead. That's probably why, right? They've lost all their functioning, but outwardly it was considered successful because they were so much calmer. So again, we know quite a bit more now than we did then. This wasn't the most common, but it was definitely practiced. What was much more common was to do an exorcism. And an exorcism is where you coax an evil spirit to leave a person's body, traditionally done with an old priest and a young priest, right? If you like to watch horror movies, I'm a huge horror movie fan, as I mentioned to you, and there's so many movies. Here's just a few that feature exorcisms. And this is something that is still practiced today, right? Exorcisms are still done, much less frequently, but it comes down to an interesting idea of what lens do you view a phenomenon through? If you view it through a lens of faith, then somebody who's agitated and speaking abnormally, maybe we do believe that they're possessed. And so in theory, an exorcism might make them better. If you believe you're possessed and we perform like a ritualistic exorcism, through that placebo effect, you might get better, right? And so we still do practice this a little bit, but if we view it through a lens of psychology and science, we would probably see it as mental illness. And interestingly, a few of these movies have that theme in it, like The Exorcism of Emily Rose and The Last Exorcism, The Rite. Several of these have a theme of, is it mental illness or is it possession? And it kind of depends on which stance you take and how you view it. And I have a little clip to play for you that I think highlights that debate. It's from this movie, The Rite, and nothing like scary, which may be good or bad, depending on your take on scary movies. But I'll play this for you. And then we can talk about it a little more if you want. He called a psychotic illness. Psychotic or psychosis means that somebody has lost contact with reality. And we'll talk about that more in chapter 12. Schizophrenia would be the most common psychotic disorder. But oftentimes, exorcisms were practiced on people who were hallucinating or maybe not in contact with reality or speaking in a bizarre way. And we would view it at the time as possession. And the only way to treat it would then be to get rid of the demons that are possessing the body. And again, a very dangerous procedure where a lot of people were often harmed. And it depends on your belief system. As I said, a lot of people do still practice and believe in this today. I don't know, any thoughts or comments or anything here related to this before we keep going? Any questions or thoughts or anything? I tend to believe a little bit. I think my house is haunted, right? Just to share that with you. I'm pretty sure it's haunted. There's always like a creepy negative energy out in the front room. So I tend to believe in this kind of stuff, and it's scary, but interesting. Like if we look at it in a scientific way, we're going to view it very differently. And that's really the point of a lot of these movies, is which lens are we going to view it through? And in the early days, we viewed it as possession. And that was the number one reason that people would struggle with mental illness. If we move forward just a little bit, we have a completely different perspective. And psychology is nothing but a lot of different paradigm shifts, right? Shifts in perspectives and theories over time. And so the next perspective that we see is very much along the lines of philosophers and physicians. So we go from things being very spiritually driven to things being a little bit more medically driven. So if we look at some of these early people like Hippocrates, who was called the father of modern medicine, he talked about something that he coined as our humors, that we all possess 4 different like bodily fluids, fluids that flow through our body. And they need to be in a certain proportion or a certain balance, or they can cause problems. So we talked about these 4 different humors or chemicals that can influence us mentally and physically. And if they were out of balance, they would cause disruption. And so the idea behind this was he would take blood from a person and let it sit in a container for a matter of hours. If you do that, blood will settle out into a couple of different layers. He's talked about 4. Traditionally, it's more 3, but he kind of coined this dark area at the bottom, the 4th one. And so what he would do is look at the proportion of these different fluids and decide, how are we then going to approach treatment? How do the different fluids dictate what's going on for this person? So if we imagine, like, if I have like a little beaker and I am an awful artist, it could be worse, right? The beaker, 4 fluids. Right, so at the top, again, if you were to take blood out of someone and let it sit, at the top we would get what is like the yellow serum. Right, so the yellow serum of blood, which we could call the yellow bile from his perspective. Bile is a fluid secreted by the liver, if you're wondering what is bile, right? And so we have yellow bile and black bile, according to Hippocrates. Underneath that, we would get the white blood cells. And the white blood cells would be what he called phlegm. Kind of gross to think that's one of our 4 fluids that we don't want to have too much of, right? Too much phlegm. That sounds like you're sick or something. Too much phlegm. Underneath that, we have red blood cells. which would be blood. And then at the bottom, you would kind of have this like dark, sludgy layer, like just a tiny little bit of dark, which she called the black bile. And traditionally, when we talk about blood separating, it's just these top three. So this was one that he added, so there's not really an equivalent. But depending on how these fall out and what proportion they're in, it would dictate your issues that you might have. And I want to ask you this next part, but just to give you a little bit more, if you were thought to have too much yellow bile, so if you had too much yellow bile in your system, it was thought that you had like overly frenzied activity, like you were maybe almost like ADHD-like or inattentive, hyperactive. And so what we would often do is then have treatments that would come from that. Right. So for yellow bile and black bile, it was often like therapeutic herbs and different tinctures that we might give somebody to reduce this. If you had too much phlegm, right, which again sounds odd, but too much phlegm, it was thought that you were really lazy and apathetic and tired. The treatment for too much phlegm was therapeutic vomiting, right? We would make you vomit until, in theory, you lost a lot of that phlegm, trying to restore the balance. Again, an interesting idea, but doesn't have a lot of like scientific backing to it. This isn't something that has been validated, but it was a very early idea of like medical and physical factors contributing to mental illness. Too much blood. It was thought that you were overly cheerful, maybe what we would equate to like mania now for somebody who had bipolar disorder. If you had too much blood, we would use leeches and bloodletting, right? So we would put leeches on you to remove blood, or just remove blood from the body. Very dangerous to do. People would, again, often die during these procedures, but it was thought to then restore you back to balance. And then too much of the black bile, you had unshakable sadness and melancholy. So again, starting to look at just a different way of viewing it, that your physical factors could influence mental health, right? Rather than it being a spiritual thing like we saw in the era before. There's just a different shift. And again, not really grounded in science, but an early idea that has kind of since been discarded. As we continue forward, the Middle Ages and Renaissance, we go back to the church, back to demons, back to specifically Satan, right? Forget demons in general. We're going straight to the devil here, right? It's the devil. I don't know why I'm going to tell you this, but my daughter got in trouble at school yesterday for chasing children around the playground saying she was the devil, right? She's in third grade, so it's not so bad. In kindergarten, she used to pretend she was a banana, and now she's the devil. I'm like, have you moved up or down in the world? I don't know, right? I'm gonna eat you, and now I'm the devil, and I'm gonna kill you. I'm like, oh my God, Emma, please, no. Like, getting phone calls from teachers that your daughter is pretending to be Satan. I'm like, oh, where did I go wrong? Anyway, I share random things with you. But it's specifically Satan here, right? So my daughter is chasing you around, and that's why you have mental illness. And so we go back to the church, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, all these periods of time in Europe, very much about demonology, a lot of clergy and church power. So here we go back to this idea again that the body and the mind are almost like a battleground between good and evil. And if you had mental illness, evil had won out, right? Satan, the devil, had possessed you, right? And again, we go back to trepanations and exorcisms and a lot of those kind of cruel and dangerous things. We see a lot of really interesting, really flawed, like scientific tests coming out of the time, right? And so we got a lot of like the witch hunts back at this time as well. And so they would put traditionally women, this was often women, but they would put people in these impossible scenarios where if you were possessed and we stick you under the water, if you're possessed, you'll drown, right? And then we know you were possessed. If you're not possessed, you'll drown, right? There was no winning these situations, right? And so we have these really bizarre things coming out of this time, very much related to, again, possession, demonology, and the power of the church. A lot of fear around this, right? A lot of fear related to it. And we move forward a little bit more, the Renaissance, Renaissance meaning rebirth. It was a little bit more positive time, right? In all aspects of the world. But in terms of psychology and in terms of what we're looking at, we get an interesting new development called the asylum, created by a doctor named Dr. Johann Weyer. And he had this thought that if people are struggling and miserable and having a hard time with life, what if we take them out of their normal life, put them out into like a big house in the country where they can relax and be calm, and they'll get better, right? I don't know about you, but when I picture an asylum, I don't picture like a pretty country house that's happy, right? Like, what do you think of? What are the images that come to mind, or like associations? What do you think of when you think of an asylum? Yeah.
A bed with restraints.
Okay, bed with restraints. You said horror movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, right? It's always bad. They're always haunted, right? Yeah.
Almost like jail kind of.
Okay.
You're being like held captive in a moment.
Yeah, and they very much became like almost like jails, like warehouses. Yeah.
Just in a building, gargoyles.
Okay, I like it. Yeah. Did you have any?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, very common. Anyone else have like an image or torture chambers? I think of American Horror Story season 2, right? Yeah, that wasn't bad even. I would agree. Some of them are weird. I haven't watched the new one, but that one was my favorite.
Wait, is the new one 9 or is it 10?
Was it 11?
It was 11.
I don't know. I watched the last one.
Political one really ruined it for me.
Me too. They've kind of like, they're always so hit or miss. They're either like really good or they're like, I don't know why I'm watching this. For me anyway. Was there another hand over here? I don't want to skip you if you had a thought. Asylums had good intentions, right? They really did have good intentions, but they didn't become what they set out to be, right? The images that all of you have are really spot on. They became warehouses and jails. People rotted in their own filth, awful conditions, overcrowded, no idea how to help people. We would often lock people. This is this strange like restrained crib that came out of this time. People would be locked in these cribs for days at a time, just to restrain them so that they couldn't like be agitated and harm other people. People literally rotted in their own filth and died in these places because there was just no knowledge of how to help people, right? And so even though they had good intentions, they really went in a very like negative direction. And I have a little clip of a documentary I'll play for you in a moment, but probably the most infamous, so famous in a bad way, of these asylums was a place called Bethlehem Hospital in London. And Bethlehem Hospital had a really interesting like evolution of its name. It was Bethlehem, then it became Bethlehem, and then it became Bedlam. Bedlam translates to madness or chaos. And so that's kind of where that term comes from. Someone who's mad or in like a chaotic state goes back to this term Bedlam from this hospital in London. And these asylums were these absolutely massive buildings, right? It started out with the idea of like a house in the country, but they became these huge, massive places where, again, people were often just kind of locked away for literally sometimes no reason at all. And even back to American Horror Story 2, you could have like a wife or a partner locked up for nothing. Like you could literally like, she's not having sex with me, lock her up, she's crazy, right? No contest. It would happen very easily. There was very little justification required. So I have a little clip that kind of shows you a little bit of the scope of this. So I'll play it for you. But that's where that term Bedlam comes from this hospital, probably the most infamous of all asylums, of course, in London. And it's still there today, though it's much smaller and more of a traditional hospital than a psychiatric hospital.
Bedlam was
Of all asylums. And you also get this term lunatic coming out of this time, a term that we don't tend to use too much anymore, but it came from the idea that people would have madness or kind of go insane. We'll talk about that term later in the semester, related to different phases of the moon, right? And so we get some interesting ideas out of this time of like chaos and bedlam and madness and lunatic, kind of the first huge asylum that was thought to house people who were insane. Though insanity isn't actually a mental illness, it's more of a legal term, which we'll talk about in the last chapter. Yeah.
One of the other side effects of asylums really showing up and becoming somewhat accepted was that, as you mentioned, it was pretty easy to get somebody locked up in an asylum, especially if they were somebody who didn't have great public image.
Sure.
And that led to a lot of the time people in asylums, a lot of the time in the US, the colonies at the time, I suppose, were frequently put into essentially indentured servitude, where they would rent out some of their asylum inmates and have them go work wherever they're needed,
Yeah.
which meant that asylums kind of came a way to pick random people, or even better, to pick essentially political opponents of non-Jewish
Yeah.
people and turn them into non-players in political games and stick them in work forever.
There's a lot of really awful things came out of this, right? And yeah, that definitely happened. And it's a hard thing with this. And it's even something you see now. The second you accuse someone of being mentally ill, right? In this case, like insane or not in your right mind, nobody believes anything that you say after that. Right. And so what would happen is they would lock people up, and the people, I'm not crazy, I'm not insane. And the more agitated they get, the more proof it is that they are actually, mentally ill. And it became this really unwinnable situation for a lot of people because it took nothing to get them put in there. Right. It really created a lot of issues and agendas as well, for sure. Any other thoughts or comments or anything before I keep going? Yeah.
Yeah, but like when I worked at nursing homes and other places, when you have a full moon, like residents really would get like a lot crazier, or they have like a lot of things happen all week. Like we had 3 4 blues in a night on a full moon, and so like every health worker still believes it's like,
Yeah.
if it's a full moon, everybody's a blue freeze.
For sure. Yeah, it's a thing, right? And it's something that's been around for a long time, kind of dating even back to this, right? And ideas about werewolves and like lycanthropy coming from the idea of the full moon, right? There's a lot of interesting history around full moons, and people do still have that belief that, like, oh no, it must be a full moon because people are not acting. We had a Friday the 13th the other day, right? Like again, a lot of interesting superstitious thinking. Yeah, did you have?
Police departments actually put out more patrols on
Yeah,
nights with like full moons because
Uh-huh.
of that reason.
right. Yeah, weather and like phases of the moon. There's a lot of interesting correlates for sure. Yeah. Right. So then we get at these interesting like correlations, right? Like we can say it's just the lighting, or we could say that like there's other things. It's really wild looking at some of those trends, right? Just related to a full moon. But I mean, even here and all the way back, we see that moon playing a role in the term lunatic coming from. Moving forward again, right? In the 1800s, so kind of a big jump, right? And everything that we talked about before just persisted. In the 1800s, we got a completely different idea that came forward. And this was met with a lot of criticism and a lot of resistance. In the 1800s, 19th century, we get this term called moral treatment. And it was a thought that people who have mental illness deserve to be treated respectfully, right? That's all it was, right? You deserve respect. You deserve to be treated in a humane way and have rights. And this was something, again, that was really controversial. It was a huge shift from everything that came before. And out of the moral treatment mentality, we got the state hospital. Now, state hospitals were meant to be the revamped, new version, better version of the asylums. State hospitals were going to be run by the state. They'd have more money, they'd be better, and they were going to be driven by moral treatment. That was going to be their guiding principle, that people in these hospitals would get respectful treatment, humane conditions, and so on. But they ran into a lot of the same problems that asylums did. Good intentions, again, but they had staffing shortages, they didn't have enough money, and we still didn't know how to cure all these people that we were putting into these state hospitals. So even though they had better intentions, they ran into a lot of the same issues, maybe not quite as severe, but a lot of the same problems that asylums did. And moral treatment was a huge improvement. This mentality shift was huge, that we are going to treat people better. But again, it did still run into a lot of issues. And there's a couple of interesting like paintings and pieces of art that come out of this time just to share with you. Here's one of them. So Dr. Philippe Pinel was one of the people who was thought to be instrumental in this idea of moral treatment. And so this is a painting ordering the removal of chains from patients at the Paris Asylum for Insane Women. He was one of the first people to believe that you could just have conversations with your patients and clients to help them get better, right? So he would wander the asylums or these state hospitals and just talk to people, removing their chains for the first time, trying to give them a little bit better conditions, still really awful conditions, but a little bit better, trying to move toward a different mentality. My favorite one, Dance in a Madhouse, sometimes called the Lunatic Ball. Out of this era came this idea that we needed to give patients in these places a chance to socialize. So they would have these massive balls or like parties where they would allow all of the patients or the inpatients to have these, get dressed up and dance with each other and have a big party. And you can see they're portraying them as mentally ill by having their faces be disfigured. That's a very common portrayal. But I would have loved to be like a fly on the wall at one of these and just watch, like, how interesting, like these massive parties where they let people who were considered insane or locked up interact with each other in meaningful ways. So just a different shift, right? Again, trying to be more progressive, give more rights. This is something that has definitely lasted to today. We try and embrace this mentality rather than the one that came before. Instead of leading people and doing all these bizarre treatments, to more talk to them and give them humane conditions. Lots of really popular movies featuring these like psychiatric hospitals, state hospitals. I put just a few of them up here. So shows and movies, they're always portrayed as these massive, massive places. And interestingly, over time, a lot of them shut down, right? As we get into like the 1980s, 1990s, a lot of these places just started becoming abandoned or shut down. They weren't as popular anymore. They kind of fell out of favor. And so we get tons of these massive state hospitals just abandoned across the country or converted to other things like Cal State Channel Islands, right? I've never been out there, but I'm always like, I should go. Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, really? Now I really want to go. Yeah, I think I've heard that before, and that there's still some buildings that are kind of like kind of sequestered off, right? I've never been out there, but it makes me want to really badly. But a lot of places became that, like they changed them to colleges. My first job that I had, I didn't get paid, but my first job as a psychology, like in a psychology realm, was to be someone who sat in on group therapy at a psychiatric hospital in San Diego. So all I did was sit there, and if somebody needed something, I'd go get it, right? That was basically a runner, but I got to sit in there, and it was fascinating. That hospital is now YMCA, right? So strange, right? You can work out in the rooms that people used to get like therapy in. So strange. Every time I drive by it, I'm like, that used to be a state hospital, not anymore. And then when I was in college, I went to a Buddhist monastery in Northern California that used to be a psychiatric hospital. Super creepy. I took a class, and as a side note, it was a 1-unit Buddhism class. I'm not super religious, and so I like took all these different classes to try and expand my horizons. And I got to go live at a Buddhist monastery for 3 days. And when I got there, I realized and found out it was an abandoned psychiatric facility. And I was like, double bonus, right? This is amazing. I was terrified and excited in equal measure. And they separated all the men and women so that we wouldn't be tempted. I ended up in a room with my partner, so that was amazing, right? And I was like, thank God, because I was terrified. It was like this lime green room that you could feel the creepiness to it. Used to be a psychiatric dorm, but there's so many places like this across the country that were just abandoned almost overnight as they let all of these people out into more outpatient kind of therapy. And these places fell out of favor. And I found a cool little video showing some of these abandoned places. It's just set to music. I found it on YouTube. But what I love about it is it gives you a scope of how massive these places were. They were just huge. And so I'll play it for you just kind of as an interesting star treatments, because we still didn't know how to help people, but it was still definitely a step up from some of the things that came before. Again, featured in a lot of movies. Oftentimes they're haunted in movies, right? Or have a lot of like negative energy. Even the monks at this Buddhist monastery felt like they couldn't clear 3 of the buildings, so they just left them. And so interesting, just a lot of energy around these places, that a lot of them have been abandoned over time across the country, that really became kind of a common trend, something that we call deinstitutionalization. So if we look at some of the places that we are today, kind of getting to where we are now, we use a lot of medication. We'll talk about medication a lot over the course of the semester. We have a pill for everything and a pill for every side effect that pill creates, right? A lot of medications. Medications can be incredibly helpful for people, but they can obviously have downsides as well. So lots of medications or psychotropic medications that we'll talk about. Deinstitutionalization is not locking people away in these large facilities. That was really the norm for a very large period of time. A long time it was to just lock people up, put them away. And what we realized is when we do that, people might get better, but when you release them back out into the world, they tend to have a hard time. So we tend to do more like therapy instead of locking people away in these facilities. So we do more private therapy or even cyber therapy, which is something that has become so common, especially over the last couple of years because of COVID. A lot of therapy has gone virtual, not all, but a lot. But private therapy is really the biggest thing that we do. We do a lot of therapy and medication, and we focus quite a bit on prevention, right? Trying to identify things early and see if we can turn them around before they become a full-blown disorder or problem. So kind of some of the current things that we focus on, and we'll talk about types of therapy and types of medication as we get into all the disorders throughout the semester, but really no longer putting people in these massive state hospitals. There are very few of them around anymore. Right? They're more like a wing in a traditional hospital or a private facility that people might go to rather than a big state hospital like they used to. Any questions or anything, just to check in? Any questions or thoughts or anything? Okay. We'll talk about different types of treatment throughout the semester. Lots of types of treatment, just as much as there are different types of disorders. And just as there's disagreement on how do we decide if someone's mentally ill or not with those Ds of abnormality and so on, there's a lot of disagreement about treatments as well. Right, and so we have these 3 rough guidelines that we can use related to treatment. There's a clinician named Jerome Frank who said that all forms of therapy or treatment have 3 essential features to them. And these are very broad, and they're broad on purpose. The idea is this includes a lot of different steps. So when you have a treatment, you have somebody who is suffering, who's seeking relief from someone who's a healer. Suffering could be anything, and a healer could be anyone. Right. So luckily, this leaves room for you to go to a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a priest or a rabbi or spiritual figure. This could be anyone that you view as a healer, which comes in on number 2, right? A trained, socially accepted healer whose experience is accepted by the sufferer or their social group. So if you're someone who's deeply religious, maybe you feel like going to someone of a religious background would be your best bet at help. Right. And using these broad guidelines, that still counts as like therapy or treatment. Or it might be a medical doctor, or again, a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. There's a whole bunch of different people you might see. And then you're going to have a series of contacts between the healer and the sufferer with the hope of making changes to help you get better. And this might be going to therapy, it might be going to a doctor's appointment, it might be going to confession, right? Whatever it is that you view as being helpful. And so there's just as much disagreement on what constitutes a good treatment as there is on what constitutes what's normal versus abnormal. So just keep that in mind as we go through all of these. There's a huge range of treatments, just as there is a huge range of disorders. We'll talk about all the different treatments all semester long, but just to kind of introduce that thought. And before we talk about some of the leading professions, in the spirit of like therapy and treatment, what I want you to do, I want you to find a couple of people around you, like 2, 3, 4 people, whatever is easy, doesn't have to be anything complicated. And as a group, and somebody write this down just so you can share when we get back together. But I want you to think of, as a group, before we start talking about the different professions like therapists and so on, what are some stereotypes of therapy or therapists, people who go to therapy, anything related to therapy? So it might be the therapist, it might be what you find in the room, it might be things they do or say, it might be the therapist themselves. But write down any stereotypes or associations that you can think of related to therapy, and then we can talk about it together. So find a couple of people, whatever's easy. And again, someone write it down so you don't forget. I'll give you just a few minutes. Yeah, it could be either. A lot of them are negative, right? Yeah. Yeah. That's just working. Office. I'm excited to hear what you can on. So, a lot of stereotypes in therapy tend to be somewhat negative, though some of us were talking about how they can be overly positive too. But what are some of the things you came up with? Anyone have one common stereotype? Yeah. Yeah.
Like diplomas on the wall.
For sure.
Couch and chair.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a common, you gotta have the couch, right? Of course, Freud started the idea of the couch, but a very uncomfortable one. I'll show you a picture of it later. But yeah, degrees on the wall, couches, chair, the room, right? Then you have a picture of what it would look like. Yeah,
People that like go to therapy or psychiatrists are gonna look crazy,
Yeah.
like they don't need the help, they're just going because they feel cool.
okay, yeah, really common stereotype, right? That you're going because you're crazy, you need help, right? Yeah,
We were kind of discussing like, what the psychiatrist is like.
Okay.
You think of a typical, like stereotypical psychiatrist, and it is definitely very Freudian, where it's like
Mhm.
kind of the late middle-aged guy with glasses and like a tweed suit. He's like sitting there, like, tell me about your mother.
Yeah, for sure, right? How many of you out of curiosity picture someone who's male, right? When you think of a therapist, your first thought is male. How about female? Right, interesting. So kind of split up maybe a little bit more on the female side, but yeah, that's like the stereotype. Freud, right? Smoking a cigar. Tell me about your mother. Right? For sure. What else did you come up with? Yeah.
Two things that we came up was that it's the idea that you like, if you go to therapy, you can't do it on your own, like a week.
Sure.
And then another one is that therapy is a quick fix.
Okay. Right. And both are pretty wrong a lot of the time, right? A lot of people can do it on their own, but they want help. And sadly, therapy doesn't tend to be very quick for a lot of people. Yeah.
Therapists just want to talk about your childhood.
Yeah.
Or your childhood.
Right. Yeah. Tell me about your mother and your childhood. That's all we're going to talk about. Yeah.
This happened a lot in high school. One of my friends, that she was just asking for attention
Okay.
because she wanted to be the center of attention. So the only way she could is act out.
Sure. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
We talked about the stereotype of like therapists go around like psychoing like everyone, even people that are their patients.
Yeah.
People don't take us that serious.
Yeah. The second I say that I teach psychology, I see people take a step. I'm not talking like, oh, what do you teach them? Oh, I teach them more part of college. Super excited. Oh, that's amazing. What do you teach? Psychology. And then they always go, oh. And then like there's like a step backward, like I shouldn't have said that, right? And I'm like, oh no, it takes so much effort to analyze people. I'm not doing that right now. But I have friends who I went to graduate school with who like never can take the therapy hat off. And it's so annoying, right? Like I have a friend, her name's Judith. I'll just call her out right now. Poor Judith, like forget, we saw her over the summer and I was like, oh my gosh, my kid isn't sleeping through the night. It's so frustrating. Just yeah, like and just like the you know the voice, and then like your child's just going through her process, and I'm like, I wish she would stop. Just never being able to take it off, always psychoanalyzing. Super common stereotype. What else? Anything else? Yeah.
I am written.
Oh, or related to that, that's fine.
I kind of blinked out.
That's okay. If it comes back to you, raise your hand again.
Therapists just want to take your money.
Yeah, it's money, right? Let's sit here. I'll take your money. They only care about money is another common one. Yeah.
Parents only send them to therapy because they don't want to do it themselves.
Okay. Yeah. Right. So it'd be easier to send you off. Yeah.
If I go to therapy, that's too much experience and I to talk about.
Okay. So only.
Otherwise, you keep it to yourself.
Mhm.
Don't talk.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Seen as something.
Yeah.
Depression, you can't. That's not. They deny.
Yeah, a lot of cultural beliefs and ethnic beliefs related to that. My partner's family is deeply traditional Hispanic Catholic family, which I'm really popular with, as you can imagine. But they don't believe in therapy. Waste of time, weakness. Why would you go? Like, and it's a very common stereotype in some cultures. Yeah, go here. Yeah.
Like that medications are more of a placebo effect that they don't really help people. So people on medications is not actually doing anything.
Okay. Okay. Did you have a good?
Yeah, there's a bit of an association between group therapy and like Alcoholics Anonymous kind
Sure.
of activities.
Yeah, more like NA or AA kind of stuff. What's something that no one said it yet? What's like the most common thing that a therapist would say? Anyone have that? Yeah. How does that make you feel? Right? I said that once as a therapist and then apologized. So sorry, I don't think the most therapist-y thing that people say. There's a follow-up to that, by the way, and that's tell me more about that. Right? Like common stereotypical phrases. I always think of the bobblehead. Like taking notes, right? I picture like rock garden or like a fountain in an office of some kind. Yeah, we wrote down.
Not anymore, because I used, but I was associated like kind of nurses. And
Yeah.
walk up when you see it.
Yes.
Type of thing, which
For sure, right? Very common stereotype. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are, like the stereotype is that people are like ashamed or embarrassed.
Yeah.
About therapy, that they like, you know, they don't really tell people.
Yeah.
Seeing therapists because it's so looked down upon.
Yeah, and sadly, that is a really common stereotype, right? And a lot of people go to therapy. I go to therapy. I go to therapy every week and I have most of my entire life, right? And it's just because I believe in it, right? I was trained to be a therapist and they encouraged us to go. And I just kept going, like, why not? And my family was maybe overly believers of therapy. Like, I think as a baby, I was going to therapy, crying at ink blots. I don't know, pointing at them and crying. But I've gone my whole life, right? And I don't mind sharing that, but a lot of people have that stigma of like, oh, like, well, what's wrong with you if you're going to therapy? A lot of people could benefit from it, right? Yeah,
Big generation. difference in that too.
sure.
People in like the parents' generation are like more ashamed to talk about their mental illness and
Mhm.
people in our generation. Pretty cool. About it.
Yeah, there's a lot of generational change. I would agree with you. Yeah.
I think there's a weird switch between like kid therapy and like when you grow up. Because
Sure.
I know when I was younger and my parents were going through a divorce and they like put me on a jungle gym
Yeah.
for like an hour. And I was like, hey, how is this supposed to help? Like you're just distracting. You're not getting rid of the
Yeah.
issue. You're just distracting.
Mhm.
So I feel like people could also think that therapy is just a distraction.
Sure.
And then you like go about your life and you just try to distract yourself from it.
Yeah, and child therapy, it's a lot of like playing games and distraction. I'm gonna have you play with these toys and I'm gonna watch the way you play with them and make inferences about it.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, there is a big difference between therapy when you're little versus maybe when you're a little bit older. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Yeah.
Generation differences. So my grandma, she has her master's in psych as well.
Mhm.
And she went to therapy with me as well. I want to go into it all the time, but she would, my brother and I, my parents just got divorced, I was in like second grade, and my brother and I both came up to her and said, hey, we kind of want to start going to therapy, we're not functioning well with this divorce. And even with her having her master's in it and everything, she goes, suck it up.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a common thing. Just stop it, right? Just stop it, just suck it up, right? Like,
Even though she was a certified therapist. and
yeah, that makes you wonder, right? A little bit, right? Yeah,
We said too about like child therapy. I feel like a lot of it is like forceful too, almost.
Sure.
Like it's not consentful, I guess.
okay, right, that the child is kind of forced to go,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit. I have oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
It's like shock therapy. Like,
Oh.
that was a big thing back in
Yeah.
like the 80s where it's like you would have to endure that. But now they have TMS therapy, which is
Yeah,
actually a much simpler version of shock therapy.
and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about both of those when we get to the unit on mood disorders. But yeah, very common stereotype, especially if you go back. I have one more, and this is something from my therapist specifically. Every time I go see her, all I ever hear, practice self-care, practice self-care, practice self-care. And I'm like, oh my God, if you say it one more time, I'm gonna hit you, right? Self-care. And one time, because I'm obsessed with cake, she accidentally had a Freudian slip and said, practice self-cake. And I was like, sold, of course I'll practice self-care. And so now it's like this, I've seen her for years, so it's like this ongoing joke of like, don't forget to self-cake this weekend. I'm like, yes, ma'am, I promise I will. Like, I had 3 cakes this weekend. I've done great on my self-care. Yeah, so that's another one that I have. And then the term shrink, right? A lot of people use that term shrink to refer to a therapist or a psychiatrist. It comes from the term head shrinker, and the ancient tribal practice of shrinking the heads of your enemies. That tends to kind of be how we view therapy, right? And we have this negative mentality around it. And obviously there can be bad therapists, there can be good therapists, and it's a whole range. And some of these stereotypes are absolutely true and others not, right? So just an interesting thing to keep in mind as we talk about different types of therapy throughout the semester. There are a lot of stereotypes, a lot of shame around people going, but it can be something that helps a lot of people too. And a lot of different professions here in the field. These are just some of the big ones: clinical counseling and psychiatrists, school psychologists, social workers, researchers, forensic psychologists also really relates to this. How many of you are considering a career in something related to psychology? I won't hold you to it, but considering it. A lot of you, there's so many different things you can do. with a degree in psychology. And I just want to spend a minute talking about the difference between these first three groups. And I put this up here, and I'll leave it up if you need to like take a picture. Stop doing that. I might, she always yells at me. I need to figure out so clinical counseling and psychiatrists. I just yelled at her like without even thinking about it. Clinical counseling and psychiatrists, different groups of people. They outwardly kind of do similar work, but I might ask you the difference between them. So I just want to give you a little more. In terms of education, a counseling psychologist typically has a master's degree. Now, an MA or a master's degree typically takes like 2 to 3 years. I have a master's in counseling psychology. That's what my background is in. A clinical psychologist typically has a PhD, and a psychiatrist typically has an MD or a medical degree. So this one on average is like 2 to 3 years after a bachelor's. This one on average is about 5 to 6 years after a bachelor's degree. And this one we'll say 7+. Right, depending on what you specialize in, but typically medical degree versus a PhD versus a master's. Yeah. PsyD is, it's tricky. So a PsyD is like more of a professional degree, typically for people who don't want to do research or teach. And so, yeah, oftentimes that is accepted, just not in typically in like an academic venue, but if you wanted to practice, then yes, that's typically fine. Depending on the program, it's not always 100% clear cut, but yes, usually. So that's education. They have a slightly different educational focus. Obviously, one is much faster to do than the others. In terms of their focus, what they tend to focus on, a counseling psychologist focuses mostly on like everyday problems. Anxiety, depression, relationships, communication, stress, kind of typical everyday stuff, right? Because they don't have as much of a specialized background as maybe the people who come after. A clinical psychologist focuses more on like more intense like psychological disorders. And then assessment as well, right? So maybe like doing formal assessment of things like psychological tests and batteries. They have a little more training, so they tend to delve into more like severe kind of things. Psychiatrists have a completely different focus. Anyone know what makes them different? I heard someone say it. Yeah, medication. So it's very common that someone might go to a psychiatrist to get medication and also see one of these two folks to talk about like other things going on in their life. And that leads me to the next one, the appointment. A psychiatrist, typically the appointment is about 20 minutes. Okay? It's short. Tell me how you're doing with your medication. What are your side effects? How well are you tolerating it? How well are you doing? Tell me a little bit about how you're doing related to the medications that you're on. That is the focus. Versus traditionally, these ones are 50 minutes. A therapy hour is 50 minutes, right? Give or take. Right. And again, in those appointments, this one is talking about medication versus here we're doing like behavioral or talking techniques, working through stuff, depending on the modality that you are going from. And then last one, let's talk about salary. And this is in 2019 in California, are the numbers I'm giving you. So a couple of years old, but on average, a counseling psychologist makes about $95,000 a year. About. Give or take, depending on how many clients you see and if you have a specialized area. Clinical psychologist, the average is 109. Now, I have a friend who makes easily like 175 or more, and he's a clinical psychologist. He works in Westlake, sees people all week on the weekends and in the evenings. It depends on how often you see people. Psychiatrists, be ready to want to change your career here. 242 on average. Right, some make quite a bit more, some make less, right? So it's quite a range. As you would hope, the more education you have, the more money you make. Then you can pay off your student loans faster over here, right? But they're a little bit different in terms of their focus and how long the appointments last and so on. But people go into school psychology as well, where you're working in a school setting. Typically, they have a master's degree. Social workers also typically have a master's degree. They're licensed clinical social workers. Typically, it's like a 2 to 3 year program. You can, as I said, be a researcher, you can be a professor, you can be a forensic psychologist, but there's a lot of different kind of ways that this can show up in terms of careers, very education dependent. You need a lot of education to be even a counseling psychologist. And this doesn't include the internship hours that you have to do and the licensing that you have to do in order to practice. So it's a 2 to 3 year program where you write a master's thesis plus 3,000 hours, and then you can take the exam, and then you're a therapist, right? So it's a lot, right? So these people are traditionally like really well trained, and it can take a little bit of time to get there. A lot of you raise your hand. Anyone know what you want to do or have like a rough idea of what you want to do? Or you raise your hand fast. Yeah, we'll go here and then we'll come here. Yeah. Okay. What does that mean?
So you do like different art activities with people, and while you're doing
Nice.
this, you can use it as like a tool to grow like self-esteem and like work through like inner feelings that like you normally can't necessarily like access, because like doing stuff with your hands helps you like take away, like I don't know, it just helps you talk.
Yeah, grounding kind of things as well, right? Nice. I like it. Yeah. What was yours?
Oh, I'm gonna open my own practice board with veterans, so they don't have to deal with the same shit I did after I got out the room before.
Okay. All right. So therapist working specifically with veterans. Love it. Yeah. Okay, great. You got a lot of education ahead of you, right? But that'll be amazing. What else? Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Love it. You have a few. Yeah. Great. So the biggest thing is just the focus is on medication. So you typically, if somebody's taking medication, then that often dictates a different level of severity than maybe somebody goes in, not always. And so they're working sometimes in a psychiatric hospital or on a ward in the hospital, or you might have a private practice, but traditionally you're just more focused on the medication. It doesn't necessarily be more severe, but they can kind of end up going together. Anybody else? Yeah.
I could be more.
Yeah, you should. I just, yeah.
I'm combining psychology and justice.
Say something in forensic psychology.
Yeah, from psychology. Okay. Because there's not that many male therapists.
Yeah, much more female dominated now than it used to be. All right. That's great. Same for you. Kind of
Maybe
same.
a program.
Okay.
So, therapy is my backup plan. but
Yeah.
I want to go to law first.
Love it. Did you have a hit up too?
Yeah, something along the lines of like child psychology too. I'm
Okay.
not sure exactly what it is.
Yeah, and you don't have to know yet, right? I'm just, for fun asking, like, you can change it a million times. I had every intention of being a therapist. Actually, when I started community college, I was obsessed with economics. I thought I was going to go into economics, right? Not at all. I took one economics class in college and was like, yeah, no, thanks. I'm good. And then one psych class and was like, yeah, I don't like that either. And then thankfully I took this one and was like, okay, I'm back. We're good. So you don't have to know, but there are so many options, which sometimes is overwhelming. But you can do a lot of things with a master's or a PhD in this field. There's a lot of options open to you. Yeah. Really? Okay. Who's your philosopher? Okay. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. These are my famous football. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap between philosophy and psychology. Like we share roots, with each other. And yeah, I love it. Yeah.
So I'm actually an engineer major. I'm excited to go into prosthetics and to get to now I have to learn a lot of psychology.
Okay. You're coming over to the right side. The dark side, maybe the good side. I don't know, right? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do. I've done everything from I've been a professor. I was an EOPS counselor, an academic counselor. I managed a Starbucks, right? Like I've done a whole range of things over the course of my life. That was probably one of my favorite jobs. So I was well caffeinated all the time. You can do so many different things with a degree here. And the nice thing is you're not usually locked in, right? And so don't feel like you have to choose now. You can kind of evolve as you go. And a couple other, just two other things before we wrap up for today. I'm going to take attendance one last time. This will be the last time I ever do it, but I just want to make sure who's here. I did print a new sheet so that I have it up to date for everyone who's enrolled as of this morning. And then next class, what we'll do is we'll start chapter 2. The slides are already up, of course. Chapter 2 is all about the models of abnormalities. So we'll look at the different ways we can view mental illnesses through which model we're looking at. As we continue to build up to the disorders, which are coming in like a week or two. So let me take attendance and then we'll have another nice weekend, coming. That was fast. I love this. That's too much to ask. But anyway. So because I printed a new sheet, if I forget a preference that you had for a name, please let me know. And if I don't call your name, you're not enrolled. So just come check in with me so we can address that. Alexander? Here. Brett?
Yeah.
Sarah? Sierra? Here. Trinity? Here. Alexis? Here. Thank you. I just don't want to accidentally drop someone. I said Alexis, Andre? Here. Sophia? Sophia? Are you here? Okay. Sarah? Here. Michaela? Michaela, sorry, thank you. I'll get it eventually. Oscar? Here. Nada? Irene? Here. Jaden? Here. Nikki? You were here, Nikki? Okay, thank you. Ren? Are you here? Serena? Abigail? Robert? Here. Destiny? Sergio? Here. Eric? Here. Louise? Here. Marco? Here. Naomi? Emily? Here. Jackie? Here. Brianna? Here. Jasmine? Here. Charles? Here. Naomi? Here. Catherine? Here. Jenna? Here. Riley? Brennan? Here. And Cooper? Here. Okay, so if I didn't call your name, come check in with me. Have a wonderful weekend again. And I'll see you all on Monday. I'll leave this up in case you want to take a picture of it or anything.
I already called my name, Naomi.
Okay, great.
Cool. Last name. I just wanted to apologize
that you're
again
here.
for not being able to last week.
Thank you for emailing me because I know you had reached out to me about it, right?
Yeah, I felt super. Forget or not, I'm like not gonna show up.
Did you have a chance to look over everything on
Yeah,
Canvas?
I did.
Okay.
I already looked at chapter 1 side.
Okay.
I went over chapter 1 already.
Did you do the index part?
I did. Part.
Okay, so just bring it to me on
Okay.
Monday. Since you weren't here and you had emailed me, I want to make sure I get that from you because
Okay.
it's the first 10 points. So I
Okay.
don't want you to start off bad. So yeah, just bring it to me Monday
Okay.
and remind me when you give it to me.
Okay.
So I don't forget.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
yeah, no worries. I'm glad you're here.
Good email.
What was your last? Oh, and you're on the wait list, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have an ad code for you if you want to write it down. And just try and add like today or tomorrow, just so that if there are any issues, you can reach out to me. So your ad code is 023753. So what you do is you drop yourself from the wait list and then you go to add the course again and it'll ask you for a code. So just I don't know if you have it. We'll put that in and then it'll ask you for a code, which is
Okay, so dropping the roll list, it's just reading this.
you got re-enlist.
Says, oh, so this.
And if you run into any issues, just let me know, send me an email. Sometimes the codes don't work or whatever, but it should all be. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ren. I'm here. I just zoned out while you were calling my
Thank
name.
you. No worries. No, thank you for letting me know.
Self-harm and stuff.
Sure. So for suicide, we actually will have a guest speaker coming in, and they come from our health center. So the nice thing is they're trained therapists.
Okay.
And trained